In the 1930s, Nazi Germany found a key ally in Italy, governed by fascist leader Benito Mussolini since 1925. Mussolini's regime shared similarities with Hitler's Nazism, and Hitler recognized this. However, their partnership was complex and not as solid as thought. By the late 1930s, they collaborated for military purposes, but their focus remained on their own national interests. Their relationship was more pragmatic than a deeply committed alliance. In the early years of leading the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Hitler greatly admired Mussolini, particularly for his successful march on Rome in 1922 that made Mussolini prime minister. Hitler corresponded with Mussolini in 1923, aiming to replicate this feat with the failed Munich Putsch. Later, Mussolini supported the Nazi Party financially and allowed training for their paramilitary units. In the late 1920s, he permitted Nazi groups to train with his own black shirts. Mussolini openly praised Hitler's ascent to power in 1933 as a victory for fascist ideology. In private, however, Mussolini was scornful of Hitler and his party. The Italian leader, who was not short on ego and pomposity, described Mein Kampf as boring and thought Hitler's ideas and theories were coarse and simplistic. Mussolini also had a low opinion of Hitler's elevation to power, which he viewed as political, conniving, and much less glorious than his own. The first meeting between the two, held in Venice in June 1934, was disastrous. Mussolini spoke some German and refused to use a translator, but he had great difficulty understanding Hitler's rough Austrian accent. The Italian was subjected to some of Hitler's long monologues, which bored him greatly. Both men emerged from the Venice summit thinking much less of each other. Despite this, Nazi and Italian fascist propaganda of the 1930s suggested a close working relationship and even a friendship between the two leaders. Another notable distinction between the two leaders lay in their racial ideologies. Mussolini, akin to Hitler, regarded white Europeans as the creators of civilization and culture. However, unlike Hitler, Mussolini's beliefs about race did not encompass vehement anti-Semitism or eugenics. Mussolini was an Italian patriot who frequently evoked the greatness and achievements of ancient Rome. Consequently, he looked down on Hitler's assertions about Aryan superiority. In a particular speech, the Italian leader expressed regret for the racial doctrines propagated by the Nazis, deeming them as the descendants of those who lacked education during Rome's era of Caesar. Despite their personal differences, Hitler and Mussolini did cooperate, indicating a notable Nazi-fascist alliance to the world. Germany supported Italy during and after the Abyssinian crisis in the mid-1930s. Mussolini aimed to establish a new Italian empire, starting with Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. Italian troops invaded Abyssinia in October 1935, garnering criticism from the League of Nations, but Hitler supported Mussolini's actions as Germany was no longer part of the League. Their alliance was further strengthened by joint involvement in the Spanish Civil War in 1936. In May 1939, the Nazi-fascist alliance deepened with the signing of the Pact of Steel, solidifying military and economic aid commitments between Germany and Italy. This 10-year agreement also outlined preparations for a European war and a pledge not to wage war independently until 1943. However, Hitler's commitment shifted in late August 1939, when he informed Mussolini of the impending war due to changing circumstances with Russia. A week later, German troops invaded Poland, marking the start of World War II. Mussolini received advice suggesting Italy wouldn't be ready for war until late 1942 due to slow industrial growth and military production. He waited until June 1940 to declare war, aligning with Germany's conquest of Western Europe. Mussolini's primary war aim was to control British and French colonies in northern Africa, but the campaign turned disastrous, with most Italian troops in Africa defeated by late 1941. In July 1943, the Allies invaded Italy, leading to Mussolini's expulsion from power and Italy's surrender in September. Captured by partisans, Mussolini was executed in April 1945, shortly before Hitler's suicide in Berlin, facing a grim public display of his body.